Here today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jeff Musson. I'm the founder of North of 41 and president of Dynamite Network. And together, our group, North of 41, with the TSX, I think this is about our third or fourth fireside chat with the CEOs, and it's a great opportunity to hear the trials and tribulations as what it takes to get to the top. And we've got some great speakers lined up today. I just wanted to have a couple of announcements here first. For starters, I wanted to thank Price Waterhouse for helping to sponsor today's event. For those of you that don't know, they have a really great program called V2R, and on their website, they're looking for applications currently to be filled out for their upcoming awards program. And I think it's www.v2r.pwc.com. And it's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs and everyone in the ecosystem to get involved. The second announcement I want to make is there's a great program coming up, and all of you have flyers on your seats called Technicity, coming up on December 3rd. And Italia's here. If you're looking for any further information, it's a great program that they have lined up, focusing on technology. And this is the fourth or fifth year? Fifth year, so it's a great program as well. And we also have Marianne from the DMZ who wants to fill you in on a cool program that they have as well. So.
First, I want to thank Jeff and Mike for letting me do this today. So I'm going to be short and sweet. For those of you who don't know about the DMZ, we're a tech startup incubator based at Ryerson University, home to about 85 startup companies, not just Ryerson affiliated. We recently launched a partnership with Innovation Birmingham in the UK, where we're going to be sending a startup from Canada to a scale-up soft landing program in Birmingham for 2 weeks. No strings attached, no set deadline. bit.ly/nextbigidea UK. If you're interested, come and talk to me. But like I said, this is a no strings attached thing, and it's open to startups in Ontario. So feel free to share it with your network. Thanks.
That was good. That was short and sweet. I want to turn it over to Michael now, and he'll say a few words from the TSX and introduce our speakers.
Thanks, Jeff, and good morning. My name is Michael Kusse. I'm one of the heads of business development at Toronto Stock Exchange. Really pleased to welcome all of you here and to be hosting the third of these fireside chats that we've done this year. And I was just going back for the last couple of years. I think this is the 10th that we've hosted across the country. It's part of a bigger initiative that we launched in 2014 called TSX Ignite, which is about helping build the next great generation of Canadian companies. And so part of that is very much an initiative around supporting entrepreneurship and supporting entrepreneurship in its various forms. We've got really good timing today in terms of our event. It coincides with the Entrepreneur of the Year Awards that were hosted yesterday in Toronto. It was a big black tie event, lots of tuxedos and so on. And in about an hour and a half, just behind me, the Canadian Entrepreneur of the Year is going to be opening Toronto Stock Exchange, ringing the bell as part of the market open. And so it's a nice event that just coincides with what we're doing today. And it's part of, as I said, a much larger initiative that we've put in place to really try to support the next great wave of companies. A lot of people have helped us pull this together. We've really enjoyed partnering with Jeff again. Just a quick shout out and thank you to DMZ, Mars, Incubes, and Highline, who all helped spread the word for us as well on this. That's it in terms of announcements. Now I want to introduce you to our panelists and our moderator. First of all, moderator Garrett from Bloomberg, who's going to be hosting today. Come on up, Garrett. And then our two speakers, Carl and Christine McGee. We've got a very interesting combination today. One tech founder, one mattress founder. And Garrett's going to find a way of making this all make sense for everyone and tell a very good story.
We're good? All right. So my name is Garrett Devank. I'm from Bloomberg News in our Toronto office here. Do you guys maybe want to introduce yourself quickly and maybe especially for Carl, just introduce your company and Sleep Country. I mean, we're all very, 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 very familiar with the brand and the company, but NIMI maybe not so much. So yeah. Carl, go ahead.
Sure. So Carl Martin, founder, and actually until about 2 months ago, CEO, and our company's just scaling up to the next stage. I hired in a CEO and moved to the CTO position, but we're a Toronto-based startup that does wearable technology for the purposes of authentication and security. So our product, the NIMI Band, authenticates identity based on your unique cardiac rhythm. So the way your heart beats is actually like a fingerprint, and we detect this in a wristband. This becomes your ID to unlock other things. So it wirelessly unlocks your computer, your personal devices, make payments, passwords, pins, key cards. And so it's all about making trust and security seamless.
Christine?
That sounds way more interesting, actually. So I think I'm going to come sit down. Anyways, my name is Christine McGee. I am the co-founder and now executive chair of Sleep Country Canada. And I'm not certain if anyone's unfamiliar with us, but we are a retail-based company. We have 200 and more stores across the country, coast to coast, and we not only sell mattresses and box springs. This is my opportunity to tell you what else we sell now, but it is accessories as well. We had just gone public on July 16th, and we've just moved one of our fellows that has worked with us for almost 20 years, actually just over 20 years, into the CEO role. So it is a very interesting stage I find myself at as well in terms of watching our business grow, but actually letting our next level of executives really take hold in terms of the operations and build the business even further. And they're doing a fantastic job, and I'm really looking forward to share whatever insights that I have this morning with you.
Right. So, you guys are both founders. You're both co-founders. I mean, maybe you could speak a little bit about, Christine, if you could start, how you found yourself in that position. Were you always, interested in entrepreneurship? Were you always, I'm going to go and found a company, start something new, or how did you fall into it?
So I'll be brief, but I went to business school at Ivey, and during that process, certainly got the business acumen, at least initially from a financial analysis and business skills perspective. And then I went off to about 12 years in banking because I was trying to figure out what I really wanted to do in the rest of my life, including, I thought, a very big interest in entrepreneurial venture. I got a chance to meet two of my colleagues that became my business partners when I was at the National Bank. And one of the reasons we identified an opportunity in the mattress industry is because Steve and Gord, so Steve Gunn and Gord Lowndes, were my founding co-partners back in 1994 when we started our company. And they had done the management buyout of Simmons Canada from Simmons US. And really throughout that period and looking at financing it, we got a chance to see the industry from a manufacturing perspective, but also from a retail landscape. And what it said to us when we looked at that is that there was a gap in terms of what we thought there was from a consumer experience in a category that was very age-old. And so we really decided that there was an opportunity for us to come in and provide in the marketplace an in-store home delivery and aftercare service related to a product that people infrequently purchased, big ticket item, and that lent itself to the kind of experience and structure that we wanted to create in the marketplace. And also, as we looked at the industry itself, just as a side note, it was a very attractive industry. You do have that recurring source of demand. People buy a mattress every 10 years. In the last 20 years and onward, we've seen this trend to, more cocooning, bigger homes, bedrooms, vacation properties, which really, again, create that recurring source of demand and demographics. And certainly, and Tim, we were even talking about this importance of health, right? So the importance of sleep in your lifestyle, in your immune system, in your health, in your mental health. And so your mattress and box spring, your sleep system has a part of that. So all of that boded very well when we looked at there's a gap in the retail, what the retail sector was offering in this category. And then the industry itself was also very attractive. And so we literally thought, okay, now's the time. And Steve and Gord invited me on this journey 21 years ago, and that was a terrific thing. And since then, we've built our business, and we can talk a lot more about whether you have an idea is one thing, and then how do you execute it to make sure that you build the experience, the market share, and the customer experience that creates that longevity.
Yeah, well, entrepreneurship, finding a problem and then, solving it, bringing solutions to it. Carl, we talk a lot about, in the startup world about finding a problem and then, kind of trying to iterate around it and that sort of thing. When you began, what was sort of the market opportunity or the problem that you guys saw and decided to go after, and how has it changed in the last few years?
So, I mean, we started on the technology side. So, I mean, we spun out of the University of Toronto. Myself and I had co-founder Fatina Agrafioti. We were both PhD students and had developed technologies around biometrics, how to recognize people using different signals that come off of your body. And the problem, I mean, all I have to say is passwords, right? You know, this idea of how do we prove ourselves to the technology around us. And it's interesting. At the end of the day, I mean, it took years. The company's 4.5 years old, and it was 2 years of really exploring different ways to apply our technologies before we came up with this concept. But sort of that driving force that said this is worthwhile doing is just looking at this whole space of security and trust, saying the way we're doing things today is archaic, you know, ancient people, and people hate it. And so to me, that speaks opportunities, something that everybody is forced to do and they hate it.
Right.
So that was sort of that driving thing. But it took us, you know, several years to realize how do we take the technology that we have and ultimately apply it. And so, you know, I think a lot of companies that are sort of deep technology based have this sort of exploration period, and there's this question of like, how do you fund that? How do you have the freedom to not be forced to, you know, we have to make money in 3 months kind of thing. And so that, you know, we're still quite early, you know, we're just getting our product into market now, but it's a long road.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we want to talk about, you know, leadership too, and developing that culture and everything. I mean, when you came from a technology background and you had an idea and you had this problem and you're working on the technology to solve it, but then suddenly you're running a company and you've got employees and payroll and all those sort of things. I mean, what were some of the major challenges for you initially when it comes to leadership?
So what I actually found was the biggest challenge is, I mean, I always kind of saw that coming, going from just the idea to actually managing people, managing a company. I think what was surprising was just how gradual going from you have to be doing everything yourself to, you know, and you know, I in the early days spent a lot of time coding. I'd be doing everything from talks like this to coding and doing the books and all of that. But that transition from, okay, now you need people that will do a lot of the work and you're more managing that, was very gradual. And so I think a lot of founders find that they're always a little bit behind when they should be letting go of things and letting other people do, you know, the real work. And so I just found it was, you know, I wasn't oblivious to the fact that you really need to focus more on management than doing, but it kind of came so gradually. I'm like, wait a minute, how am I spending the hours in my day? What's the most leverage on my time? And so then you start aggressively saying, okay, I need to be delegating more.
Christine, any, you know, advice when it comes to that sort of moving from, you know, beginning something, CEO, and now executive chairman? I mean,
well, it's always great when you're second, because there's so many comments that you've said, Carl, that I actually would echo. Absolutely, it was like beat the clock, and I was losing half the time, and you did wear a lot of hats. But I think one of the things from our business, and we actually had a business plan to expand 50 stores in 3 years and to hit two and 3 cities in the first 3 years, which in itself was a rather mammoth task. And we do have a strategy of go big or go home. So there was a financial obligation that we really had to make sure that we were continuing to grow profitably in terms of having that longevity. And so one of the things that I think from our perspective too is that we can really articulate what our customer experience should be in store and home delivery, which really allowed us the realization that it is about executing for us in store, living up to those promises, and that is all about your team. So as we, you know, embarked on our plan, we really understood that our associates who we were going to invite into the company and hire was absolutely critical to our success. And that is about, you know, hiring the right people, training the right people, and keeping the right people. And for us, that is all about culture. And so part of the process for us was, how do you hire? You know, and we, you know, I wouldn't be able to be in the stores and delivering trucks and, you know, doing the accounts, although initially it did feel that way. And when you start with 3 people and then grew, you know, in the first year till 50, that was a pretty quick requirement and a realization that we needed to delegate quickly, but also find a good team and train them. And so we used to talk, we still talk about the fact that we hire attitude, we train for ability. And I think that's really important about fit, right? And so being able to articulate what it is that you want the customer to experience is allowing you to share your vision, so there's some alignment from the very beginning in creating that motivation.
What did you sort of set up to make sure, I mean, when you grow so incredibly quickly,
Yes.
so fast, so quickly, it's difficult to make sure you actually have the right people and
Right.
you have the right attitude. Like, what kind of processes, like concretely, did you guys say, this is
Sure.
how we're going to make sure we hire the right people?
So initially, in the early going, certainly we were, and I was responsible for all the interview process. I mean, there was a series. It would be myself, my business partner, our sales manager. In the first 6 months was my husband, and then we hired Dave Friesma, who's now our CEO. So there was 2 or 3 people, but we were very involved in the very beginning for the first few years, to be quite honest, because every role is critical. But after a while, we realized that we did have to create some kind of a process today in order to, hire properly and to delegate that responsibility. For example, in our sales team, we've actually worked with Knightsbridge, and we've created a profile. And it's one of the screening processes. So we have used more recent tools in order to provide our team, our management team, the right processes in order to identify the right people. It's one thing, but still that whole interview process initially was done by us. And then when our leadership team was being promoted, we needed to make sure that they understood what are we looking for, how do you articulate what we're trying to do, how do you articulate our culture, so that we find people that fit. And generally, it's worked. Certainly, at the end of the day, hiring the right people is important, training them, and then creating a culture of accountability and measurement is the real opportunity as well. Because at the end of the day, for our team to be successful, or for us to be successful, our team need to be successful. So those are all the things that have to be, as part of that process.
Right. Okay. Carl, are there any things that, when you founded your company, you're like, this is the way I want to do things, this is the way I think is right, but then turned out was completely wrong?
So I guess the big thing for us was just you're always you have a vision, you have a thing you're going to want to achieve, and you have a bunch of hypotheses around it, and turns out many of those hypotheses are wrong, and I think the big thing is that you have to be, there's this real balance between certainty and clarity. You can't have certainty at the early stage, especially with technology startup. You're looking at where does this fit in the market, and our ideas of where it fit were wrong. And I mean, I can relay the example of we had the core technology, the biometric piece. It wasn't wearable. It was just algorithms to do this, and the market was pushing us towards things that already existed, right? Things that that we were competing with, things like fingerprint, which everybody understood and knew in the market. And so, there was this element, okay, we have to listen to the market and go there. And turns out that was wrong, right? Because it's kind of like, especially at the early stages, your customer can't design your product. They can't just figure out what it is. That's your job. And so it's a weird balance between, you're always told, listen to the market, go where the market is telling you. But at the early stages, the market was not educated. The market didn't really understand the potential of what we were doing. So what was surprising was that initially, actually, we need to listen to the market, but then pull back and say, okay, take some of that information and then figure out what we're doing. And it took 2 years. And the challenge is now we're doing something that can be a little bit hard to understand, but we know it has a reason to exist. It's not just this sort of 10% better from what's out there. I mean, the thing that we learned is you can't sell the 10% better in new technology, because then it's easier just to default to the credible existing alternative. So it's like, what's the 10 times better? That's kind of crazy, but now you have a reason to exist. And so it's this weird balance between, taking what the market is telling you versus just being contrarian and doing something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mistakes, Christine, that you want to?
I've made a few.
Yeah.
But in terms of the business, and it's an interesting question, as I heard Carl answer with respect to technology. And when we looked at our company and we looked at the opportunity in the industry, we really looked at what was the retail landscape at the time. And part of our research was to go in and shop our competition, as well as ask our family and friends and colleagues, what did they experience when they went and bought a mattress? And the confusion, infrequent purchase, you don't know what you're buying. And then we thought, if we're so smart, because we did decide to design our business plan about that in-store and home delivery, but then we thought, if we were so smart, how come no one's doing it in Canada the way we wanted to do it? And one of the things that we took the opportunity to do was go down to the US and look at, we were introduced to a company on the West Coast that was actually doing a very good job of building about 30% of the market share in 3 or 4 years, against what was a very competitive marketplace like it exists in Canada today. And they were approaching the industry a lot like we wanted to, which is really providing that in-store and that consultative approach and selection and offering product that, on a Canadian context, you would have thought would never sell. Anything over $1,000, people generally thought, it was all about price. It was a commoditized product. And we really said that this was way more than that. And so in our experience, one of the things that validated our approach was to go out and look at what the market was doing and what they weren't, but also, believing that it's a process of going out and designing the experience and then fine-tuning it. Right. And so you don't know what you don't know. But at the end of the day, you still have to do a significant amount of research, what's out there, and then how do you differentiate yourself in our category, which was highly competitive and highly commoditized. Right. And we were trying to offer a service and value model, which was unheard of. And so we certainly, it was the right approach. The difficulty for us wasn't really the approach of it. It was now the execution, right? And in the past, and you alluded to a little bit, but we didn't expand into a new city till we'd actually created enough scale in the one we were operating in order that we would have profitability and that we could really create the team in order that then we could expand. And our ability to expand wasn't capital constraint or idea constraint, because there are different factors of your success, as you all know. But ours was having the right bench strength, having the right team and resources from a human resource perspective, such that we could then transfer that knowledge and culture into the next region.
Right.
So if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, just on culture, I mean, a lot of the things you're saying about how you hire for attitude and train for ability, I mean, these are very sort of in vogue ideas. People talk about culture all the time, and at least in the technology world, it's a total buzzword and that sort of thing. I mean, when you founded your company, I mean, to be honest, I wasn't paying very close attention to business and what was going on. I mean, what was the discussion in business about culture, and would you say that it was different then than it is now?
Well, I don't, there's always been conversations about culture and open door, but I think, authentic management, a team orientation, facilitation of ideas are becoming normal course language that we talk about. I have to say, when we started our company, having been in the financial institution industry for 13 years, and you learn from a variety of individuals that you work with, as well as management styles and culture. And so even though I enjoyed working in the financial institution, one of the things that was become very apparent is that occasionally it becomes very silo mentality. People protect their assets, they protect their contacts, they protect their knowledge, because it is a highly competitive within that context. And it starts to, you understand that may not be the healthiest way from a cultural perspective to develop your company. So when you start your own company, I did have the luxury of saying, I really wanted to develop a culture that was one that was without the politics that is normal course, that it was collaborative. And in sales, by the way, on a retail perspective, that isn't always the case. In fact, your sales and distribution team can be natural issues because they blame each other when something doesn't happen. And so as we set off on our goal at Sleep Country, we really wanted to create a culture that was collaborative, it was team-oriented, and that the individuals understood that they're the most important thing to our company, right? So them feeling supported from us was everything. So I don't know, Garrett, if in fact the buzzwords were existing, but I would say that it is true throughout the ages, really, as to related to how do you develop a company that's successful, and building your team and then feeling important and rewarded and that they have the best ideas, and my job is to facilitate it, but also monitor it is really important.
Right. Carl, have you run into any challenges when it comes to culture, in terms of, it is something that we talk about a lot, and it's something I'm sure your employees, who I assume would mostly be quite young but very educated, know what they want. What kind of challenges have you run into from taking these buzzwords and these ideas that are really well developed in culture and as we talk about them to actually into your business?
Yeah, so you hear tons about hiring for culture, and something to realize that culture is something you create through your own leadership plus the leadership of everybody in your company. And so we've actually moved away from this concept of hiring for culture, because there's this risk of creating essentially a monoculture, right? That you're actually not encapsulating diversity that actually keeps you innovative. And so it's only been recently we've actually started to solidify the concepts that really matter when we're hiring. So attitude is one of them. How is this person going to behave when things get rough? The other one, instead of culture, it's values, right? What are the core values that the person has? Meaning, when when things get rough, what are the things that they are going to depend on? And then the third one is judgment, which is how do they make decisions? You trust them to just go off and make decisions and know when they're out of scope of their skills, and to go to other people. And so by doing that and avoiding this concept of, well, will they fit in? We don't look at whether they will fit in. Do they have those things? And then they can often bring something new, some new diversity, and that diversity can be across any sort of dimension. And but that's the foundation that would make it work. And so I've just found there's no shortcuts to those things. We're still small enough that I still interview everybody, but I do it from that lens rather than kind of are they going to fit in? And in the tech world, it's actually a really big problem where companies look like monocultures, and it's not welcoming to diverse people, and I think that harms us all.
Yeah.
I love the language that he's using, because I think it isn't mutually exclusive to the right attitude, which is a combination of variety of, I love the word values, and I think it's very true. One of the things that we talk about in our company is that our culture is not something that it's ever changing, right? Every single individual that comes into our company has the opportunity and will in fact change our culture, and hopefully for the better. And so the engagement of that is very important. And so as I get a chance in the orientation process and go in and chat with my team, as we hire a group or individuals, we talk about culture as it relates to what we're trying to do, and that in effect they have the opportunity to make us better. And the reason we bring them in is because innovation, new views, their experiences lend value to our company. And so I echo your comments, and I love the way you described it, because I think that is a very powerful way to look at a hiring process.
Right. Change tracks a bit. Christina, I have to ask you, I'm really curious about the process of being a private company, public, private, public. Among CEOs in corporate Canada, you've probably had the most balanced experience of both of those things, and going through it a couple times. So what are some of the big takeaways that as a leader that in a big company between being private and public that you have?
Well, I think we've done it a few times, and there are certain obvious aspects to it that I think all of us in this room would be aware of. One of the things that made our transition from a private to a public much easier is that we actually, from the very beginning, had a great rigor related to our business. We had a board already. We had audited statements. We understood that at some point that we were hoping at growing our business, but there has to be that rigor related to governance, financial management, financial reporting, and advice. And so the move from a private company to a public company wasn't as difficult as one might think, but there are costs associated with it, and just in terms of resources that you have to have, which at the end of the day might not actually add value to the business itself, because it is over and above in order that we can communicate properly to our investors so they understand what we're doing. The challenge, which you all would know in the room, is that having to share sometimes your strategies prior to really being able to execute isn't necessarily a competitive advantage. And we were a single focus product in mattresses, competing against other companies that were multi-product that could hide their numbers within it. And so, because of the fairness of the public markets as it relates to information sharing, if we were going into a marketplace, we could originally do it pretty quietly in order for us to land properly, advertise, and without the competitors being too aware of it before. And so I think the dynamic changes just in terms of, what you have to share is tougher, because in a highly competitive market, it can be not a disadvantage, it's just a reality. Mm-hmm. But I think for us, because of how we set up the company and because of the rigor associated with our structure, it wasn't as difficult. Certainly from our financial partners, as we went public, it was an exit in order for them to find liquidity, and that's terrific. We haven't used the public markets from a capital perspective. Right. I can see it being a very positive thing if you need capital in order to grow. So the purpose of going public can be a variety of differences. In our case, it was because our financial investors were creating an exit. And that in itself is a very positive thing. So that would be my...
Any plans to use the public markets to raise capital? Or?
Well, I don't know. I can't even say. It's no. At this point, we just went public. Yeah. We've had we haven't had to in the past.
Okay.
We'll let
Hopefully,
the future
we're not going to break
unveil
news
itself.
This morning. Yeah, Carl. I mean, you guys obviously a startup, private company, but when you begin a company, even employee 1, 2, and 3. I mean. Are there certain things that you already kind of put in place, with the potential that, okay, maybe one day we are going to be public? Or is it just something that you're like, well, we'll deal with that later down the road, and it might be a distraction at this point?
Yeah, so it's the latter. No, we didn't think of, now as we're bigger, we are putting in some of that rigor. I mean, we have a CFO and our, there's always best practices there, so you're ready. In the tech world, you want to extract value from what you're doing, and that might be an exit to another company, it might be going public. So you kind of have to be ready depending on the way things go. But in the early days, I've actually seen this where startup founders, it's a matter of focus, and it's like, well, there's only so many things you can do, and unlike Christine's company, is that we didn't have the concrete execution plan because we're still figuring out what we were doing in the market. If we were focused on the rigors of preparing ourselves for going public, we'd be missing out on so much. So for us in the early days, it was reminding ourselves that we have to be focused on the problems that are pertinent now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. One thing that I just want to quickly ask about is, for a lot of people in the room here, in business, maybe thinking about starting a company, maybe just starting out. When you're sort of a young person in your early 20s, and you're kind of you're interested in business, maybe entrepreneurship, but not sure what the right path is to take. Would you say like going to do an MBA, or maybe start doing your own startup without just for the experience? I've heard people say it might actually be more cost efficient to just take your 40 grand and do your own startup and learn that way rather than pay Ivy 40 grand to get an MBA. So potentially controversial idea, but what do you guys think about that, Christine?
I don't think there's any one path to any destination. Mm-hmm. I think everyone has their own way to get there. It would be almost inappropriate for me to say one way or the other, because I've had the experience of meeting a number of individuals, colleagues, that have taken a variety of paths that are so different. When I was at Ivy, one of the fellows that was a very good friend, he had his own little business and put himself through university, got his HBA, sold his business, and skied half the time in the winter in some place in the world, and then ran his business in the summer. And in fact, he didn't probably ever need to go to business school, but he wanted to because of knowledge. I had to figure out what I wanted to do, and I had taken some financial skill set in order that I could continue on in my development. So I don't know if that's an answer that I can give that would be realistic, because I think all of us in this room, and yourself, you know that different people have done different paths. For example, my business partner and I, because Steve and I have been in business for longer, Gord had to leave the business because of health earlier, but our paths to that place, to be beside each other and partners and starting Sleep Country, were so different, right? I was Ivy, business banking for 13 years. He was an engineer, MBA, McKinsey, had a little M&A company, and then we started Sleep Country. And so there isn't one path to anything. I think depending on your skill set, your desire, you learn differently. I think though the general experience I've seen in certain entrepreneurs is that they've had to work in some case with some folks in order for them to develop the skill sets, knowledge, even the networking, in order that when they then start the business, they have a platform in which to use that to generate, their contacts, their business acumen, their and their team. Mm-hmm. So,
do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, sure. I'm a huge fan of, actually, when it comes to this, very short-term thinking, which is that, I find people with this sort of the 5-year plan that says, well, here's how it's going to lay out so that in year 5 I'm going to found a company and this is what I'm going to do. Never works out, because life happens and things happen. So I'm a huge fan of doing something where you're going to love that thing just for itself, whether it be to get another degree or to go into the workforce, and because that's the fertile ground where you will find opportunity and you're going to stay up all night and really apply yourself. Because if it's you're regimented, then it becomes calling it in, and then you're going to miss opportunities. So just do something not knowing what the outcome is, and opportunity will come, I think.
Do we have any questions in the audience right now? Anyone wants to go? Yeah, go ahead.
I look and talk a lot about higher attitude and higher training skills. And obviously, attitudes that you look for that are germane to your but do you think that there are specific attitudes which are fairly universal that every business that is hiring should look for a specific set of attitudes? You found that something that's not just germane to one of your two companies?
For us, I think, and I think this applies everywhere, which is, what is this person going to do when things get really tough, right? And are they going to start pointing fingers at other people, or are they going to just take ownership and, ride it out? I think that applies everywhere, because every business has a rough road, and so that's very hard to test for. Mm-hmm. And we do it just by really long interviews and actually keep asking the person questions to the point of when there's no answers, how do they respond? Do they get frustrated, or do they take it as it comes and just get creative? And I actually find that's a really good swing point: frustration versus creativity. And I think that applies everywhere.
I like Carl's comments about value, judgment, and just that whole engagement positive. And I think the reality is that is a difficult thing, for us to identify that as a language. However, I think the actual gut feel, that process, is very important when you're in that conversation. And it's, we've all had to do interviews, so we understand that, you ask about their experience and then you throw in a question that's not unrelated and you see how they react. It's about the person themselves, right? But what's very interesting to us, and we were just sharing with our board, is that, and I'll take our sales team specifically, and so as we started to try to emulate and hire more and more, we thought there could have been a profile. And we worked with somebody like Knightsbridge, which is an HR, which is really, it's a screening process. At the end of the day, you may not score really well in that, but there are things, because I've had a great interview with you, that caused me to think, well, maybe that's not as indicative, right? So I say that there are probably some universal questions and processes to go through to determine those aspects that you really want to, those individuals you want to bring into your company. But, I don't think you can replace gut. I do think you have to have that one-on-one. But I do think that there is some good success. We've had some great success with the profile, because what we did is we took a number of different successful individuals within our sales team, very different people, and using a Knightsbridge, it could be anyone, started to talk about the attributes of those individuals. And so and we tested that process over and over again, and it seems to work for us. It is one delimiter, though. It's not the only one. And so the opportunity is to figure out, I think, what are the questions that you need to ask to get to the value propositions related to the individuals that you want to bring in, because that's who you want to attract. But it's very difficult to say, the universal truths are the people that we enjoy working with, but they need to have the abilities, right? And they need to, how do they get motivated? Those are all the things that come out a little bit when you're hiring, way more when you've already hired them. And that's about connecting with them afterwards, too.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, how do you guard against micromanaging your organization? The results are what you expect them to be.
Micromanaging? Well, now I'm not involved. No.
Yeah, sorry. The question was, how do you guard against micromanaging in your company?
Well, I'm not certain that micromanaging is a bad thing, to be quite honest, in some respects, right? But it's about it's about that connectedness, right, with the individuals. And so how do you have that dialogue with individuals that work with you on a performance level? And so I think that one of the things that I'm very proud of is our training program, but it's an ongoing. It's not just an initial orientation. It is, what's the constant dialogue, one-with-ones, that an associate opinion surveys, what are the touch points that we have on a regular basis in order for us to understand how the individual that works with us is feeling and also how they're doing. And so that, to me, I'm not certain that I understand the question, how do you keep yourself from micromanaging, because at the end of the day, all the action of our business is the interaction with our customer. And so, we really want to be very close to our team that are providing that experience and have them really believe and understand that we understand the impact and the value of them to our organization. And that means we need to be connected. Now, I don't need to now, but certainly they're the person that they go to as their mentor and coach, that area sales manager, the regional manager. I think that's a good thing. I mean, at the end of the day, I want our team to service our customer with the flexibility and knowledge that they own that experience. But I also want them to feel supported. So I'd rather have the micromanagement as a support tool in order to help them be successful, as opposed to us telling them that they're not doing the right thing. I think we reverse that process as to the dialogue so that if they're successful, we're as a company successful and they feel more engaged. Does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe back there, Michael. Do you want to-
Christine, just a quick question. Friday and Monday are likely to be fairly strong retail days this week. The future of retail,
Yes.
as 200 standalone stores, as we're seeing same-day delivery in major cities in the United States, what's the experience going to evolve into? Obviously, you've got to have great consultative sales, when you're time of purchase. But the internet really doesn't provide that. You're not, the internet is a high-tech side. The in-store is a high-touch side. So where are we going as 200 stores? Is this a Best Buy approach where you're subletting to complementary brands that are going to come in, or you're doing the same like an American Girl within Hudson's Bay? What's kind of the vision now that you've succeeded and have this network?
Well, that's bricks and mortar, right, versus e-commerce. And so it's funny, earlier before we came up on stage, we were asked to think about what's the biggest challenge for each of our businesses. And I shared with Carl, for us, I think, as I look, it certainly is this advent of e-commerce, social media, the internet. But it's also an opportunity. So, as a public company, I can't explain all of our strategies, and it's not a defense; it's just a reality. But I think for us, let's discuss it in the basis of just advertising. Right, 21 years ago, I could reach 60% of the ears and eyes of all our customers in the markets in which we operated, and it couldn't be 100% because I couldn't advertise on CBC. So between radio and TV, I could reach our customer. So, and hopefully with compelling messages in order to have them come into our stores. Today, consumption of media is so different across the board, right? You know, a lot of 20-year-olds and older don't have TVs on a conventional. They watch TV online. My daughters don't listen to conventional radio. It is a challenge as it relates to how do I stay relevant? How do I talk to the marketplace, my potential customers, and reach them in various ways that they consume media so that I encourage them and compel them to come into our store or onto our website. And so, you know, at the end of the day, I think that we have to be cognizant of it. I do think as retailers, though, there is a tactile aspect to our purchase and product that will continue to require a consultative approach as it relates to purchasing their products. But I think there's an opportunity as well for us to recognize that there are customers who, given where they are, they may never walk through our doors. How do we service them? So, you know, I think it's very prudent for us as, you know, retailers in our category, but across the board, to understand that we need to provide service to customers that have a very different way of path to purchase, and that's ongoing for us. And so I think it's going to continue to be a combination. I think it means that we do have to be very good in that consultative process in store to build that word of mouth. Word of mouth is still so powerful, and the ability for customers to go online and make comments is very, very critical. We need to make sure that from an execution, we're excellent, and that from the opportunity to serve the market, we also have to figure out that way very, very well as well. So, does that make sense?
So you guys are both well-spoken founders. You know, Christine, your voice is imprinted on my brain from the amount of times I've heard you on the
my
radio.
mother says enough already with the answer.
But as you see yourself stepping into new roles, there's a bit of maybe a risk and reward of having the founder as the very public spokesperson of your organization. Maybe you could comment on
Sure.
what you think about that.
I get asked that quite a bit, and you know, at the end of the day, I would say that it has been a very prudent strategy from us from the beginning, just as it relates to personifying the company and from someone from the company standing up and talking about our services. But our company today is way more than one person or the spokesperson. And in fact, I would argue that if you look at our advertisement, we are actually, you know, broadening the breadth of ways we message, right? Tina, the line drawing, and using various voices. And so I'm not in all the commercials at all, and nor should I be anymore. Because really, advertising is very powerful. And having a spokesperson is. But truthfully, I think we've now built up a cumulative experience in the marketplace that we stand more for just like, what is it that a customer expects when they go into the store, home delivery, and after sale. And so I think that our brand is way broader now, much deeper as it relates to what we stand for as a company than myself. I think that it would easily take my no longer being the spokesperson and smooth transition without losing a beat. I have to say, we used to laugh about this because it is funny to be in a boardroom when people talk about branding your company around you and ask, what if I die? And everybody got really comfortable with that, I have to tell you. Because I think they thought there'd be some media buzz and we'd actually, you know, increase the number. And I thought, I check the car now as I leave my parking lot in case there's something going on. But, you know, I think that many companies have successfully transitioned away. I think we stand for way more than the person who just stands up and talks about it. And that is the cumulative individual experience our customers have had.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo some of that because I spend a ton of time speaking at forums like this. But to my point before about the diversity of our organization, I encourage everybody to tell our story. And you know, I'm kind of acutely aware of the fact that at the end of the day, I can only still have this sort of narrow channel of my experience. That's not the same as everybody else's experience in the company and how they connect with what we're doing. And so I encourage everybody to tell our story. You know, naturally, founders are always going to be a little bit more forefront, but it's, you know, I think welcoming others to tell the stories just enhances the image.
I can repeat the question after.
This question's a bit more on the entrepreneurship side. Thank you. And basically, people I've spoken to in the past have said that one of the critical roles or difficult roles that they had as the founder, as the CEO of the company, was knowing when to work in the business and when to work on the business. And so I'm wondering, how you would make that decision, and when do you know what to do for that, to basically successfully grow the business. And the other question, Albert Lai, I believe it was, I was speaking with, and I don't know if you know him, but anyway, he's often said that he regrets his first sale. And he regrets it because he developed the technology. It was his baby. He had this company that he was growing, but he was burned out. Yeah, the money was great and whatnot in terms of the offer made to him, but he sold it because he was tired. So again, for a young entrepreneur, you're working around the clock, 7 days a week. How did you establish that balance that got you through, and you didn't end up selling too early? So the two questions.
That's a really tough question, actually, and I actually struggle with this a lot, which is and this does also go to this question of delegation and how you spend your time. There never seems to be enough time to work on the more forward-thinking strategy and more organizational level things versus actually getting things done. The way I try to handle it is just look at, well, what's the one thing that we as a business need to accomplish, right? Pick a milestone, maybe it's a month from now. It's too easy to say there's 10 things we need to accomplish. What's the one thing we as a whole business need to accomplish? And what's the way that I can help make that happen? And sometimes it's feet on the ground, sometimes it's much more strategic, and so it's hard. I think it constantly changes, and I can't say that I've personally mastered it, but to me it's down to focus. What's the one thing we have to accomplish, and how can I help it?
I certainly haven't accomplished it, but I'm working on it. And but I think in my case for our business, the two things: the sheer size and expansion of our company caused the requirement for us to realize that we needed to delegate. And as that happened, the realization that individuals that then were given those responsibilities were usually better at accomplishing that role than I was, because I had I had so many different things I was paying attention to, and dedicating individuals with that responsibility who were ready to take that role actually showed that they were able, willing, and wanted to, and added so much value to the company. The challenge always is, in our case, was, you have to wear all these hats. You can only increase your overhead to a certain degree because there is a cash financial constraint to that. And usually when you can create that plateau where all of a sudden you cannot expand one more. You can't do one more thing without having another resource, because nothing is going well, becomes an interesting play in that process. And so what I've often found at that point is that you then chin yourself on an investment of bringing in that individual. And what happens generally in our experience is that how much better we were because we brought that person in, and it actually allowed us to then go to the next level faster. But it's a real delicate balance, both in terms of what can you afford to bring in as it relates to your financial constraints. It's also making sure that when you bring that individual in, you give them training, knowledge, experience, and the responsibility of making the decision, as opposed to they're there, but you're really not letting them lead or manage, right? So I have to say that one of the things for me, and this might not have been for Carl, that made my requirement to delegate more is I got pregnant and had to have a child. And I have to say that was funny. A life-altering thing like that can occasionally cause you to do something that you're holding on to. And for me, even though I didn't take much time off, it certainly made it more difficult for me to be there as often. And I had to learn to let go certain things. And I was reminded how great my team were and how ready they were. And it was their opportunity to actually shine. And it really improved our business. So.
Carl, you've you've raised very decent money for NIMI. We've heard constantly, time and time again, how the market, the finance market here in Canada for companies raising north of $5 million isn't active or as liquid as you would want, and companies constantly going down to the Valley or New York to continue their financing. I'd love to hear your opinions on whether you think this is changing moving forward here in Canada, and whether you think the tech lobby run by Mr. Masili is going to play into that, and maybe your opinions around whether you'd like to join or whether you think it's a good idea.
Sure, so good question. I like to view it for tech startups, or there's multiple phases. So at the very early stage, financing tends to have to be very close to the company because the investors want to be close. They want to keep an eye on their investment. So that early seed stage capital, so we raised about $1.5 million at the seed stage. They were all local, mostly angels, some one VC, Relay Ventures. And we were lucky because we were somewhat plugged in at that point through an incubator that we were part of. That's a difficult stage. So I think a lot of early stage tech startups have trouble in Canada because they actually try to go down to the Valley and they can't raise it because there's an expectation that they will be close to the investment. Later on at Series A, so we raised about $14 million in our Series A. That was a mixture of Canadian and American money. I actually find today it's not that big an issue. I would love for more of it to be Canadian. You know, we can maintain our Canadian status and get all the benefits of that. But in terms of just the ability to raise capital, I find, you know, the money out of the Valley is looking globally, and so I think that if you have a good company, a good deal, you can raise that money at the later stage when they don't have to be right next door. And so I think that's been okay. And I mean, to your question of that new tech lobby that's coming together, I'll give the political answer and just say we'll wait and see. I'm a little bit leery of sort of trying to get too entangled with the government, but I know the biggest challenge is when you find out you're being out lobbied by some other party and you didn't even realize it, and I think that's a risk. But I'm taking a wait and see approach on that one.
Okay. Cool. Well, I think that's all we have time for. But thank you guys so much for joining us, Christine and Carl. Thank you so much.
Thank
It was good.
Thank you.
Yeah, just in terms of closing remarks, just a couple of very brief things. First of all, a big congratulations to Christine and Carl on the companies they've built and are continuing to build. Obviously, it's great to see such entrepreneurs in Canada. And also a big thank you to the three of you. All three of these folks have kindly just given their time this morning. They woke up early for this, and so we really do appreciate it. A small token from us to thank you for that, and really do appreciate your insights. We're going to hang around for another 10, 15 minutes if you want to just come up and ask a couple questions. And if you have to leave, of course, feel free to leave because you've already given us a lot of your time. So thanks so much.